It's Wednesday in Simpsonville, South Carolina. The temperature's in the low 50s, but the sun is out and it is a beautiful day as long as you stay in the sun. Today, I want to test you a little bit. Suppose you were out and you saw somebody that was stumbling and had slurred speech. What would you say? Let me give you a second situation. Suppose you saw a man sitting in a dark, elegant restaurant. A pretty young lady, probably easily 20 years his junior, walks in. He hugs her, gives her a little kiss, and you know, because you know the man, that this is not his wife. Third situation. A woman is in a very questionable neighborhood of town. She's not well attired. That is, she doesn't have a lot of clothes on, but she's out flagging down cars. How would you see those situations? Well, before I tell you the answers to each of those three things, let me tell you about the story from John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. You remember Jesus had been teaching, and there were a number of men that brought a woman into the center of the square and set her down right there in front of Jesus. And says, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. The law of Moses tells us that we should stone her. What do you say? Well, the book of Leviticus and the book of Deuteronomy both say that the woman that was caught in adultery should be stoned. Leviticus is chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 22. But the scripture reveals to us that they were testing him, that is, testing Jesus. And they persisted in asking him this question, what should we do to her? What do you say? They were just looking for him and thought they had him on the horns of dilemma. If he said stone her, they would say that he didn't have a lot of compassion. If he were to say don't stone her, then he would be going against the law of Moses. But Jesus stooped down and wrote something in the sand. When they persisted, he stood up and he said, let he that is without sin throw the first stone. Then he knelt down and began to write again in the sand, and it says they went out one by one, elders first and then the younger. Caught in the very act. The law of Moses clearly said to stone her. But the scripture here reveals to us that they were only testing Jesus. Well, there's some interesting things that you have to ask yourself at this point that go beyond what's written in the scripture. If she was caught in the very act, where is the man that was with her? You see, the Old Testament law also provided for punishment for the man that was involved in the adultery. So Jesus saw their hearts, their motives, and he recognized that their major concern was to try to trap him and had nothing to do with the act of adultery. As a matter of fact, because they didn't bring the man, he saw the hypocrisy in their hearts. So what do we say? Well, Jesus wasn't approving adultery by no means. Certainly it's a terrible, terrible sin. But so is judging. And so is doing things with a deceiving heart. Interesting, isn't it? In the Christian world, it's one of the few places where people say we bury our wounded. We're so busy judging one another, condemning one another in areas that we don't struggle, smoking, drinking, whatever it might be, that we're looking down our spiritual noses at one another. Now, I'm not condoning adultery and I'm not condoning drinking or smoking, but I'm just saying we should be in the redemption business, not in the condemnation business. Why, it's very, very clear to me that this story is a good story to remind us about our judgmental attitudes, about being careful about our judgments, even if we don't speak a word what we think. So let me go back to those three illustrations. The man that was stumbling with his speech slurred was having a stroke. If you thought he was drunk, you were wrong. The man sitting in the restaurant a very attractive young lady, much younger than he, not his wife. It was his daughter, who he hadn't seen in years. The woman in the streets. Her husband had had a heart attack. It was the middle of the night. She was in her nightgown, but she was on the way to the hospital with him in the car when, in fact, they ran out of gas or had engine trouble, and she was trying to get help because there was a gang of thugs that were closing in on their car, and she was trying to get help so she could get her husband to the doctor, to the hospital. Did you judge him correctly? Probably not. Appearances aren't always what they seem to be, and judging is not left to us, it's left to God. And he can take care of judging much better than we can. What we need to do is a lot more introspection and looking at our own lives, not judging others. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.